So many storylines this weekend, and the Duke Blue Devils are going to try to spoil Miami's party on Saturday.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making this Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. He is JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. Whichever channel you're watching us on, thank you so much for being here. We're going to give you our predictions for Duke at Miami this Saturday, 12 noon from Hard Rock Stadium. Key matchups to watch. Grades so far. I guess we're a little past the midseason. I had midseason over there in the on the side, but we're a little bit we're about two-thirds the way through the season now. And JJ, I got to ask you because I've covered Miami for a long time, and that includes the recent Manny Diaz era. 3 seasons as defensive coordinator, followed by 3 seasons as head coach of Miami. It's going to be Diaz's first trip back to Hard Rock Stadium. Is that something that the Duke head coach, has he addressed that during the week, and how's he feeling heading into his return to South Florida?
I think if Manny Diaz picked the scenario, Alex, he would not have addressed that going into the week, right? I mean, he's you know him. He's a ball coach. He wants to be dialed in on the 22 players there on the field and not any of the outside storylines and that sort of thing. But of course, when he speaks to the media, he's been asked about it throughout the course of the week, and he's in a really good spot ready to do that. In fact, I found his quote pretty interesting. Speaking to it, Coach Diaz said, quote, "There's a great saying that no man crosses the same river twice before he's not the same man and it's not the same river." And that's really the way that I look at it. I've grown. I'm different as a coach and a head coach and as a man than when I was at Miami. Certainly the program is in a different place by every metric from when I was there. So I'm at peace. I've moved on. We still go down there a lot. That was his quote. So he seems to be in a really good spot. He throws a philosophical quote and thought out there to kind of let you know where he sits in. And I think that kind of set the tone, Alex, that he wants to look past that and wants to really dial in on, like we said, the 22 players that are playing this one.
Yeah, and I think that's a great quote, and I like Manny Diaz. I thought, and I said this to you, before the season when we were at the ACC kickoff together in Charlotte, that I thought he needed more seasoning. I don't think when he became head coach at Miami, I don't think that was the right time for him. I think he learned a lot in his 3 years as head coach there. I think he learned a lot, going to Penn State, to a gigantic program, having a lot of success there as the defensive coordinator. I think it's a better time for him because I do not believe that a head coach is a finished product that early. And Miami was his first head coaching job. So I think he's in a better spot now, certainly. And in terms of the spots that both of these teams are in, Duke has dropped 2 of their past 3 games, but they had their first 5-0 start since 1994. Miami is 8-0 for the first time since 2017. So you could say, like, grading on the curve, these have been good seasons so far. Like in the case of Miami, obviously, JJ, it's been an excellent start for the Hurricanes. It's not been perfect, though. Miami does have the number 1 scoring offense in the country. They've got the number 2 passing, number 2 passing offense in the nation. Actually, number 1 in Power 4. The only team that they're behind there is North Texas. The defense, though, has been hit or miss for the Hurricanes so far. You had the handful of games, consecutive games against Virginia Tech and against Cal and against Louisville, which all ended up being close wins for Miami, but had some big-time coverage breakdowns in those games. And Cam Ward at quarterback, who's one of the Heisman frontrunners, really had to play Superman ball in all 3 of those games. He didn't have to do that against Florida State. Miami was able to find success mostly on the ground, rushing for 230 yards in that one. So we kind of have this feeling in South Florida where it's like, you're 8-0 and Miami is on track to play in the ACC championship game, but you get this feeling that Miami hasn't played their best football yet in terms of complementary football, complete games. So we're always kind of wondering, is this going to be the week that happens? Is next week going to be the week that happens? But I think Mario Cristobal has done well. He's shown some evolution. If you look at how Miami's passing attack has taken off, and the Hurricanes are so lucky to have a quarterback like Cam Ward. He's just been tremendous. So it's hard for me to give Miami anything less than I would say like an A minus so far with the way that they've started. The offense gets an A plus plus. The defense gets about a C. So you average that out, it's somewhere in the A minus B plus range. How have you felt about Duke football so far?
Yeah, honestly, kind of similar to what you've said for Miami, and the fact that you look at these programs, Donno, and this is not going to be a secret to anybody or outlandish to say, historically, these football programs are nowhere near the same conversation that takes place, right? You're talking about undefeated marks since 2017 within the last decade. We're talking about 5-0 that Duke was for the first time since 1994, 30 years. No one on the roster was even alive the last time something like this took place, right? Your football program has ESPN 30 for 30s and Netflix documentaries and all the coverage in the whole wide world out there about the U. And Duke is only viewed as a basketball school, right? And so it's been amazing to see what Manny Diaz has been able to do in his first year, giving a lot of credit to what Mike Elko did the previous 2 seasons with this Duke football team. Going into the season, I was high on the hire of Manny Diaz, but in a lot of ways a little reserved because it felt so good that it was such a home run hire for Mike Elko to come and take over that Duke football program and do things that they hadn't really done before. And how could Manny Diaz in his first year even live up to some of those expectations? He did that. He surpassed so many of them. He wins 5-0 start, first time since 1994. Duke beat Florida State, which I know Canes fans love. That had never happened before, had been 0-22 all time. And so, yeah, if I were to give out similar grades, Alex, I'm genuine when I say I think defensively, shocker, Manny Diaz side of the ball would kind of be that A++ department for this Duke football team because they have been getting after you. You look at where they're at in sacks and tackles for loss. Got to give defensive coordinator Jonathan Patke a lot of credit for what he's done with Manny Diaz on that side. Again, names that are familiar to the Miami program from Diaz run. And then offensively, that's kind of where Duke has had its highs and lows, great moments, not so great moments throughout the course of the season. And that's where you would kind of veer in that C plus B minus range. And so averaging it out, really, really pleased with where Duke is at this point of the season. Again, just as football programs, there's still a mountain of difference between the two schools.
Now, I mentioned some of Miami's imperfect performance, and there have been times when Miami's been a little bit sloppy with the football. Cam Ward threw a really bad pick 6 against Cal. Miami was able to overcome that. Too many turnovers against Virginia Tech. They were able to overcome that. So Miami has been able to mistakes have not cost them wins to this point. You got to explain to me what happened with Duke last week, though, JJ, because this has happened before. I think about 15 years ago was the last time this happened, but I can never remember seeing a team going +6 in the turnover margin, 6 takeaways to none, and still finding a way to lose that game like Duke did against SMU. And it's like part of it, and I know it sounds like an insult or a backhanded compliment, but I do respect the fact that Duke was able to force 6 turnovers in that game. And if that happens to Miami, Miami's probably not winning the football game. But how did you guys not beat SMU last week?
I mean, in some ways you can explain it, but you really can't. It just does not make sense. How does this happen? Yeah. How does a team have 6 turnovers or, force 6 turnovers as a defense and not win? They didn't score any points. Duke scored 27 points in that game. None of them came off the 6 turnovers. Like, how does that even happen? Like maybe you win a game, you force 6 turnovers, or lose a game, you force 6 turnovers. But none of them came off any of those turnovers. It's crazy when you look at what Duke was able to do. They fought to the very end. Special teams was horrific, missing a PAT. They had one missed 40-yard field goal that would have given them the lead there late in the fourth quarter. And then as time was set to expire, again, after a missed 40-yarder, Duke goes out, gets another interception. they're able to kind of dribble out the clock, to use a Duke basketball school analogy there. You set up a 30-yard field goal to walk it off, and it's blocked. It's blocked. It doesn't go in, and Duke goes to overtime. Manny Diaz goes for 2 to try to win it in OT. I love the call. Absolutely love it. And unfortunately, the play just didn't execute. So, yeah, that's a tough loss to take on the chin for sure if you're Duke.
Yeah, and I can understand like going for 2 in the context of the state of the kicking game at that point. Like I totally got that. I was not shocked that they went for the win there. And folks, we got a big football game coming up this Saturday. And also we talk about Manny Diaz. This is going to be very interesting because he's back at Hard Rock Stadium for the first time. We'll talk about the odds. We'll talk about the key matchups. How this game is going to be decided on the football field. We're going to give our predictions a little bit later on. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He is JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. We're only getting started on this Locked On crossover event. I'm only getting started on the FanDuel app. And yeah, there's a lot of action you can have between Miami and Duke this weekend. Miami are big favorites. Maybe too big. I'm looking at Miami minus 20.5 right now against Duke. Over under is 54.5. Miami games have only not gone over one time this year, and that was against Florida State last week. So 6 out of 7 games involving Miami have hit the over. And guys, you can get all the college football action, all the NFL action at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On College Football. We're starting to get a lot of buzz about how that CFP could shake up in a little over a month's time. Spencer McLaughlin has you covered with all of that, big storylines, all the big games on Locked On College Football, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. There are, when we look at matchups on both sides of the field, JJ, both of these teams like to bring pressure, like to sack opposing quarterbacks. So I'll give you the floor first, though. What matchup or matchups when the Hurricanes and the Blue Devils meet do you think are going to decide this game?
I think it's fair to start there, Donno. I think it's fair to talk about that defensive front for Duke and what they're going to be able to do against that Miami offensive line. And not only that, but the quarterback in Cam Ward, who is as elusive as it gets in the sport. I mean, as a Duke fan, as a college football fan, Cam Ward is as exciting of any player to watch. I mean, so fun to watch that guy extend and make plays. Hopefully it doesn't happen too much on Saturday. Hopefully guys like VJ Anthony off the edge for the Duke football team, Cam Bergeron coming in from that outside linebacker spot, Wesley Williams getting active on the D-line. Hopefully some of those bigger bodies can make big plays for Duke defensively. But I think that's the big question mark in this one when I look at it, is this Duke defensive front has been so effective at Penn State last season. Manny Diaz, one of the top defensive coordinators in getting after the quarterback. Jonathan Patke at Texas State, second in many of those ranks. Now they're leading this Duke team, and Duke has been towards the top of the entire country in tackles for loss and sacks. I mean, the two brains are back together on the same defensive staff and making things happen. So I think matchup-wise, that's one of the ones you got to start with.
Yeah, and I start there as well. We're of the same mind with that. And I think obviously Duke is going to do it a little differently. They're going to put the Manny Diaz flair on it, but they can definitely look at some of the success that Florida State had last week, where they were able to sack Cam Ward 4 times, running stunts, disguising blitzes. Miami's offensive line, it's weird because they can never seem to be good at both phases at the same time. Earlier this year, they were dominant in pass protection and not so good at run blocking. Lately, Miami's big eaters up front have been opening up crazy holes for the running game, but they haven't been protecting Ward as well. Miami's actually fallen now to 67th in the country in sacks allowed this year. Duke is 14th in the country in team sacks at 3 per game. Now, on the flip side, that's an area Miami excels at as well. And Duke has done a good job protecting Maalik Murphy this year. Miami is near the top, averaging 3.25 sacks per game. So I think this is an area where both teams are going to have a strength when it comes to rushing opposing quarterbacks.
Undoubtedly, and I think getting after Maalik Murphy could be a difference maker as well. That's where I was going to go. Not only the defensive front for Miami, but what does that secondary look like against Maalik Murphy? Look, to start the season, he wasn't playing his best. There was an interception too many in a couple of those opening games for Maalik Murphy, and a lot of wide receivers not able to create too much separation. Jordan Moore's been banged up throughout the course of the entire season. Out of the backfield, Jaquez Moore has barely played at all for the Duke team. Eli Pankel has been a bright spot in that wide receiver room. But then even beyond that, while Maalik Murphy has gotten the job done, and while I am nowhere near entertaining a quarterback change, that thought is just kind of wild to put out there. There have been wild throws. There have been inaccuracy questions that have been brought up by Maalik Murphy or of Maalik Murphy over the last few weeks. And so, Donno, I'm so curious if Miami's front is able to get after Maalik Murphy and put more pressure on him than he's seen in recent weeks. Can he avoid the sacks, one, but then beyond that, with pressure, can he still throw accurate passes, or is it going to be a field day for that Miami secondary?
Yeah, well, and Miami's secondary has not been very good, so it's one of those things where their best pass defense comes from the pass rush, because if they give opposing quarterbacks too much time to throw, there have been some communication. Yeah, it's been problematic, and I'm kind of wondering, like for Miami, maybe I'll pick your brain a little bit on Duke's rushing defense, because like oftentimes the stats can lie a little bit, right? Because Duke has been statistically so good against the pass. Where, the numbers against the run, they're 88th against the run. They give up 160 rushing yards per game. It doesn't look as good. Now, for Miami's offense, they've shown that they have an ability to take what a defense gives to them. It's been a pick your poison type of offense. And if Miami does have a hard time throwing the football, Xavier Restrepo had a tough time getting open against Florida State last week. If we do see something like that, Miami has also shown they can pound you on the ground, and Damian Martinez has really been hitting his stride over the past couple of weeks. So how much confidence do you have in Duke's rushing defense right now?
And that's where I would go next, Donno, is that I think about some of the plays that frustrate you as a fan, or the ones that just don't go your way defensively so far this season. It really hasn't been too many opportunities of a wide receiver going over the top or a DB getting lost. If that's the case, it's just, hey, good play, quarterback beating the defensive back. A lot of times it's been, how in the world did that guy get 15 yards out of what should have been a 2-yard carry or whatever it may be? How did it turn into a 40-yard run? I'm thinking about one of Cam Porter's carries from the Northwestern game a little bit earlier this season coming to mind right now. So I think in many ways, as you said, that could be an area of attack for Miami to look at, because Duke has been susceptible at times and trying to, contain that rushing attack. And I think that's a good thing to bring up.
I look at special teams wise, just in terms of kick coverage. Miami's had some breakdowns, like they gave up a kick return for a touchdown against Louisville. Miami hasn't. They've had a couple times where they've been close to breaking a kick return, but they haven't gotten a kick return touchdown yet. Miami's kicking game has been solid this year with Andy Borregales. The punter has not been too busy. Dylan Joyce, he only punted once last week, for example. I'm not sure how many he's at on the season, but have you felt, and you can go more in depth, I guess, on Duke's kicking game after what happened last week, but overall, special teams wise, what are you looking at?
Yeah, Todd Polino, I've enjoyed watching him play over the last few seasons for the Duke football team. He's had some big kicks, big moments, and that sort of thing. But as of late, it feels like when you need one to go through, it hasn't been happening. And that would have been the scenario, again, with that 40-yarder to kind of put that SMU game to bed. And then you look at special teams, and there's an issue with protection on the field goal attempt, a 30-yarder to win this thing as time expires. and you can't get it done. And so hopefully that is something that Duke has put a lot of focus on this week throughout practice. I think Polino is the guy to still be back there kicking for Duke. He's 10 for 15 and field goal attempts on the year, 20 for 21 on that extra point. And it was a costly one in that SMU game this past weekend. So hopefully they're good in that department. They have had to punt a few more times than Miami has so far this season, and Reynoldson's done a fair job for the Duke football team. I really look at the field goals, and if it came down to a big-time kick on the road, mind you, it's tough to be inside the head of a college kicker, Donno. I mean, I do not envy their jobs whatsoever.
Well, it's
especially on the road.
Miami has this weird trend where it seems like opposing kickers always get a career long against Miami. Like there have been some 58, 59 yarders from the opponents that have gone in. So this might be the get right game for Polino. It's like it seems like a fluky thing. It always for whatever reason, you line up a kicker. Oh, he's never kicked more than a 51 yarder. Here he goes from 59 and it's good. Like it always seems to happen in Miami. But when we come back, we'll make our predictions. And again, the FanDuel number for this one, Miami is giving 20.5 points, 20.5 point favorites at home against Duke. Over under is 54.5. We'll talk about our score predictions and game predictions when we come back. He's JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked right here on this Locked On crossover. I am so stoked about 5 Hour Energy. I love this product, and our friends at 5 Hour Energy, they know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. Guys, you know what else gives us a little bit of fan fuel this week? You think about moments like, for Duke, first 5-0 start since 1994 this year, first victory ever against Florida State. Miami just got a win against Florida State, their biggest rivals, first 8-0 start since 2017. All this stuff gives us fan fuel, and 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're preparing for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. Thank you for making this Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's awesome when we can do these crossovers and simulcast, whether you're listening to us on Locked On Blue Devils or Locked On Canes. We appreciate you guys for being here. So, all right, JJ, Duke comes in pretty hefty underdogs on the road in this one. How do you think this plays out?
Yeah, I was a little surprised, as we've talked about already, that it was that wide of a margin. As I start to piece this together in my mind, I do think Duke is in a spot with a loss last week. You can make the argument that this is where it really falls off, right? Duke's already gotten to bowl eligibility, a couple of tough games left on the schedule, the emotions of Manny Diaz coming back to Miami, and things can get really ugly over the last few weeks. I don't think that's the case. I think Duke will be able to cover. This has the makings of, a 38-24, 38-21 type of game for me in favor of Miami. So I think the over hits as well. I do think the offense for both of these teams will be able to make a couple of big plays. But that's kind of where I see this one sitting. What about you?
I could see this game being really, really close through halftime, like the type of thing where you feel like one play either side could break it. I think that Miami, I don't think Miami's going to quite cover either. I think if Miami is going to be able to get some breathing room in the second half, it's probably going to be a couple of big plays with the running game where they've been so dynamic in recent weeks. Damian Martinez has just become a downhill bowling ball. The fact that Miami has the luxury of being able to rotate Martinez and Fletcher, who are both 225 plus, really helps them out in that regard. So I think that's going to end up being the difference. I'm going to go, and the score I've been thinking about for the last couple of days before I even looked at the over-under, I guess Vegas just gets me. I don't get Vegas, but Vegas gets me. So I'm going to go 34-20 Miami, and JJ, the over-under is 54 and a half.
Right on the number. Yeah.
And I came up with the number before I saw what the over-under was. So again, like I'm sure if I place a wager on it, I'm going to be way off. It's going to mush whatever that number is. But I'm going 34-20 Miami. And I think it's a game that, again, like it's, even if it ends up being a double digit, I think it's going to feel pretty close until later on. So
yeah, and I do think this is going to be such a fun game to watch. You've got two exciting transfer portal quarterbacks, something for us to get used to in the years to come in the sport, right? With what Cam Ward has been doing at Miami and Maalik Murphy the same at Duke. And then look, Manny Diaz might not be making a big deal out of it, but I love seeing guys going back to their old spots, right? And just what that's like to be in the other locker rooms, all of these various things. So I'm going to enjoy every second of it, regardless of the outcome, and excited that Manny Diaz gets to be welcomed back now as the visiting head coach there to Hard Rock.
I believe this is the first time we've ever had a matchup of two Cuban-American head coaches. So
how about that?
This one is for all the Cuban coffee. All the croquetas are on the line for this game.
That's perfect.
I love it. Well, great job. And thanks everyone for tuning in, making this Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and make sure you subscribe to both channels. I mean, we're both working hard here. Subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils, subscribe to Locked On Canes, and we will talk to you guys again next time on another episode right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.